All right, so today we are going to be doing more authentication, but this time we will be doing authentication for endpoint usage. Let's see. So we will be working off of the Django REST Framework Wine API repo. Like usual, you will want to fork the repo and run through a basic setup, which consists of creating a virtual environment, installing your requirements, running the database, and then for the rest of the demo, we will be creating an authentication app and testing that authentication with Postman. The basic auth flow is a user account is created with a post request. A token is then generated and retrieved with a GET request. Your token can be submitted in further API requests, and the validity of the token is checked by the API. The first thing we'll be doing is creating some boilerplate code. So within our settings.py, we will need to define permission and authentication classes within the settings of the application. We are going to be creating a constant for the REST framework. And within this constant, we will be adding a default permission classes type that will include the is authenticated state. We're basically using this built-in setting because anything falling under this setting will be protected by default. And when dealing with authentication, we want protection. We're then going to add a default authentication classes type to classify the type of authentications permitted by the application, which in this case will be a simple token authentication. Once you have created your constant, you then add the auth token app to your list of installed apps, and we are ready to go. We then create an app for creating accounts using the start app command. And within that app's views.py, we import our usual stuff. Oh, sorry, I thought it was moving. There's the adding auth token to your installed apps, and this is where we're at now. You're importing the usual stuff, which is the create API view because we have the create views, and we are importing the user library. We're using the built-in user model to avoid having to do any additional coding inside the accounts.models file. So by importing the user class from the built-in Django contrib.auth.models library, we can bypass some extra work. And then we'll be importing a serializer and the allow any function from the built-in permissions library. So once we do that, we will be ready to create views for signing up a new user. We create a sign up view class, which uses the create API view built-in class. And we write a function to perform the user object creation this way. The Django REST framework allows us some leeway here by providing a create user method. And we're using this built-in method because traditionally the user model is special due to its relation to the password field. So it can't be created with usual methods such as user.objects.create. Ultimately, this built-in create user function allows us to create a user without being a valid user first. Once we have this function created, we will be adding a serializer, which is very straightforward because we are using a built-in serializer. We then set up the account apps URLs, and then we add these endpoints to the top level URLs file. Very straightforward. The challenge for today is to then apply what we're doing in the demonstration to your own application. And I recommend working off of the application that you all started yesterday during yesterday's challenge, which should be, how is that going, by the way? Did you all get to actually do the listed challenge a few days ago on Tuesday, right? I
Yeah,
believe.
it seemed like they just wanted us to kind of work on our idea a little bit and try to think of a database schema and all that.
Did you get far enough that you could add authentication to this prototype?
I personally did not, but I don't mind just starting one from scratch and um, yeah, just adding some stuff in there.
Right on. Yeah, I think yeah, that would be the best way to go about today's challenge. So let's switch gears and I'm going to share my VS Code so we could run through this. Uh, this one. And here we are. Cool. So let me zoom in a bit and move a few things around. Okay. We're going to work off a fresh clone. So let me actually get out of here. Let me also run Docker compose down to remove my existing containers. And I will grab the URL for the wine API. And I will cd up, create a new folder. And I will clone our repo. From there, I am going to, well, I want to deactivate the previous environment I was in. And then I want to set up a new virtual environment for this new fork. So Python v drf.wine.api. Then let's source that. And then we could hop in. Anyone want to remind me what to do next?
Install the requirements.
Yep, we are going to install our requirements. And we will be doing that with pip install with the R flag requirements.txt. All right, what's next?
Dockerize.
Yep, let's run Docker compose up and we should be good to go. I'm also gonna actually get my other window ready here. Get out of here, do the same thing, go back to the right folder, cd into the right fork, and now I'm gonna activate my environment here. Okay, now that we have our fresh fork of the wine API, we can run through our demo. So the first thing we're going to be doing is creating a few settings. So inside of our demo drf-wine wines.settings.py, we want to create a constant, a REST framework constant. And this is basically going to be two key value pairs. And we're going to start with default permission classes. Again, this is the built-in setting that will allow any state or type that we contain in here to be automatically protected. REST framework.permissions is authenticated state. So once a user is created and they have passed in their authentication token, they will exist in an is authenticated state. And then we will create a comma there, add a comma here, and then add our default authentication classes, which allows us to define the type of authentications that we permit for the application, which again, in this case, is going to be a very simple token authentication. So let's do REST underscore framework dot authentication dot token authentication. All right. Let's see, now we want to add this to our list of installed apps. So we go back up here and we add REST framework. What was it? REST framework.
Like .authenticate or something.
Yeah.
Auth token,
Auth token. Yeah, I'm blanking on
auth token, yeah.
it. Auth. Whoops. Wrong window. Auth token. Is it,
I was debugging for like 20 minutes because I forgot that. So
yeah, definitely don't want to forget that. Yeah, I'm not, for some reason I'm not seeing where it is in the docs. Oh yeah,
You talking about in the README?
yeah. I just noticed it's not inside one of those black boxes. Okay, cool. We are good to go. So we could close this and we could move on to creating our app. So let's hop back into our console and let's run Python manage.py start app accounts. And now that we have our accounts app set up, we can start working on our views. And we are going to be using a lot of built-in stuff. So like I mentioned earlier, we will be using, well, first we're going to be using the generic create API view function. From generics, we create API view. And as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be using the built-in user model. So we don't have to do any additional work inside of models.py. Models, import user. Next, we want our serializer. And that's going to be sign up serializer. And we import our permissions. Now we can create our sign up view. Okay. First, we're going to have a query set variable. Which will contain all user objects. And then we will have a serializer class using the built-in sign-up serializer and a permissions classes array. And we will just use in the built-in allow any function from the permissions library. Now we can actually create our function for creating users. So let's do a perform underscore create, and we will be passing in the serializer. We will write a conditional. So if the serializer validates, returns valid results, we can set a username parameter to equal the validated username. So validated data username, and then same thing for the password. serializer.validated data, password. Okay, let's minimize that. We'll then want to run this create user function, which again allows us to run some Django REST framework magic. Basically, this allows us to create a user without being a valid user already. It's sort of similar to granting yourself sudo access in console. Password equals password. Now we have to just create a serializer file, serializers.py. And here, let's import our serializer again. It's a model serializer. And then we're going to import user because we're creating users. Let's create a class. And this class will be an instance of the model serializer that we've imported. Model will be a user, and then the fields will simply be username and password. Again, these steps allow us to bypass doing any additional stuff inside of models. Okay, now we are ready to create our URLs. So let's create a urls.py. And again, we will be importing stuff. So from Django.urls, import path, REST framework, auth token.views, import the obtain auth token function. And from our views, we'll import the sign up view that we have created. URL patterns will be a path for getting the token once the user has been created. So let's do comma, obtain auth token. Really just allowing Django REST framework to do all the magic for us. And then another path for signing up a user, which will use the sign up view that we created and an as view function. So this is good to go. Let's save this. I don't know why I opened that. Let's close this. Let's close that. And let's go to our top level URLs to add the new endpoint that we created. So it will be path accounts. And we're going to include the accounts.urls. All right, this should all be pretty much good to go. So now we can run our migrations and spin up our server. Managers.py, make migrations. Manage.py, migrate. No migration to apply, but I was going to run it anyway. And then let's do a manage.py, run server. We should now be able to access from our browser our endpoints. And I will switch screens so this can actually, so you can all see all of this live. Okay, so right now we are not able to see anything, but all we have to do is create a user and password. So we are going to create a post request using Postman to do this. So let me also drag up Postman. And I am going to create a new request. We're first going to create a post request. And we are going to make this post request to the sign up endpoint. So for me, it's because it's running locally, it's going to look like this. And then we want to include in our request body username and password fields. So let's add a username, let's add a password. And we're gonna just run, I don't know, admin and admin. And now we send our request. We're told that authentication credentials were not provided. Why is that? So let's take a look. Does anyone have any idea why this was rejected?
I'd head to the terminal. I might tell you.
All right, let's do that. Let's head to our terminal. And what does our terminal say? Post account sign up, 403. It is forbidden. So let's see, why is it forbidden? Let's go into let's go here. I'm going to close this. Go back to our accounts app and let's look at our code one more time. We have username, we have password, allowing any. Let's see.
You mind going back to the settings real quick?
Sure.
To the REST framework.
All right, let's do that. We're down to REST framework and let's compare this with
That looks good.
yeah. And then we did add this to our installed apps, REST underscore framework auth token.
I think you have to migrate.
Okay, let's try another migrate.
The migrate should already be done when you spin up the containers, right?
Right, and we did manually
Real
run
time.
migrations and migrate before.
Okay. Yeah, I was reading the REST framework and it said make sure you migrate after you add stuff to the settings.
Oh, maybe, yeah, maybe that's what you need to do.
Well, we did. We before running the server, we ran make migrations and migrate.
Oh, okay.
Did we spin up Docker before we made all the changes though?
Yes.
So maybe that had something to do with it.
I don't think it should.
Right. Yeah, we ran Docker Compose up. Let's take a look at so a 403 response is a forbidden request. So let's see, why is it that this request was forbidden? We are from Postman.
Did you update the main project URLs?
Main project URLs. Yes, I did that. From wines URLs, we have accounts with account URLs. Let's see.
Accounts under in the settings under, is it application or whatever?
Where is that?
Under settings.py,
Mhm.
where we have like the framework or like installed apps, do we need to put accounts on there? Back to the top, or am I completely off? Like yeah. Oh, never mind. Yeah, it's already on there.
Yeah, this is what we should have added.
So
But
I was having trouble with mine. I put, instead of the IP address, I put in localhost.
mhm.
I think at one point, and it fixed it. I don't know why.
Okay.
My brain's moving really slow right now, so this probably isn't it. But do you have to do the thing where you have like the kind of how we did it for like AWS, where you have under services in the Docker Compose YAML, you have the API, and then you have in the settings, you change the localhost to like DB and the port to 5432 kind of thing.
Mhm.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't feel like that's right, but my brain's running slow, so.
Before we go down that route, let me see if I'm gonna read the directions again and make sure that I'm passing in my username and password correctly. So let's see. Did it say to include it in the body? Make sure the request body has username and password fields. I'm going to try adding this as a parameter.
Is there a difference between that and adding it in raw JSON?
That's a good question, and I wish I could tell you, but I do not use Postman on a regular basis.
Okay.
I usually just create requests through curl. So let's try
I
that.
think that's the,
Okay, so
I would give that a shot. Raw JSON.
okay.
In the right corner there, it says text. If you change that to JSON,
Mhm.
that's how I did it.
Okay, so let's give that a shot. So let's say username, admin, and then password, or admin, whatever. Let's give this a shot. Authentication credentials were not provided.
I think the colon has, I don't think there can be a space there, can there?
You said I don't need spaces?
Yeah.
I have a feeling I might not be. All of these are being rejected, so I might have missed something in the accounts.
I think it might be worth deleting the migrations and getting rid of the containers and then re-spooling them up maybe.
Maybe.
That'd be what I would try, but I'm no expert.
I'm just gonna. I'll go on.
Since you don't have like because when we did like the Docker Compose YAML, that's where we like said the ports were going to be like 8,000 to connect to the API. I guess where are we trying to connect with the 8,000 right now? On that. Okay.
Yeah. So we can see that we should be able to hit these endpoints. So we get our, as expected, we get the forbidden when we try to hit lines. And if we were to try to hit accounts, sign up. Don't match any of these, this first thing. So my paths may not be set up correctly. Go back to our top level URLs. Am I missing an import? It's
Yeah, that's all matching up to mine.
Yeah, it's all matching up to yours, yeah. Okay, let's look at our serializer again. I don't think it'd be a serializer. But just doing our due diligence. Yeah, very strange. Let me exit out of here. Let's run this again. No changes detected, just as expected. Shouldn't be anything to migrate. That's weird because I just ran through this right before class and worked fine. Let me see, where am I? I'm pretty sure I'm running this from the right location. But so we're not spending too much time on this. How many of you have been able to get this to work?
But I finished it.
What about the rest of you all? Let's try to get a consensus here.
I haven't started on it yet.
Haven't started.
Okay.
Yeah, me either.
Okay, it is a fairly quick exercise. I would recommend running through it. So let's run through it on our own. If you've already done it, just go ahead and get started on the actual challenge, and we can reconvene in about an hour, check in at about 7 o'clock to see how you all are doing, if you're able to get it to run locally, and do any additional troubleshooting as needed. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Cool. All right, let's do that. Feel free to take a break since I am ending the recording. And again, we will check back in at 7. Okay, so now that I've identified my errors, which again was a typo inside of my settings, I had a dash here instead of an underscore. And I actually even found one other typo. I had permissions classes instead of permission classes. And I think this was actually what was causing the forbidden response. Basically, we weren't able to use the allow any permissions because I had the wrong variable set. And now that this is fixed, I can go to Postman and I can hit my sign up endpoint. And I'll be passing in a username and a password value that I want to use. So let's just say user1 and a password of password. I'll send my request and my response tells me that the request was accepted. Now I could hit my next endpoint, which is the get token endpoint, because now that the user and password have been added to the database, a token has been generated for it as well. And I could use this endpoint, which points to this built-in function, obtain auth token, to retrieve the auth token that's generated. So I'm going to pass in the username and password that I created, which is user1 and password. It's inside my body, and I make a send request. Now I have retrieved the token. With this token, I can now create one more request, which is the request to the wines endpoint, which will allow me to see the wines inside my table. basically I will be I'm making sure I'm making a GET request. The other two were post requests. I will be making a GET request with my headers set to have an authorization key. This authorization key will equal token with a capital T, a space, and the token that was generated. In this case, it is that value. And now if I hit send, I should receive this response. This is a good response, despite it saying that something does not exist. Basically, my table is empty, so this is why I'm getting this. But I'm seeing that I'm able to hit the endpoint, and my request is returning a response. So that's actually all good. Any questions?
I have one that's kind of unrelated, but sort of related in a way.
Sure.
I basically started my project to like from scratch, but I did it to where I Dockerized both the server and the database.
Mhm.
And I want to now use Postman, but I have the server running like not in the back, or it's running in the background, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
So it doesn't show the IP address like yours does because you're not running it in the background. Where would I go to find that?
Okay, let's see. Can you share a screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to take a look at your setup so far. If I'm sharing, let me stop sharing.
So everything's good to go.
Mhm.
Both of the containers are running,
Okay.
the API and then the database, but I just need basically the IP. Is it just going to be the local host IP, the 127.0.0.1?
It's hard to say, not knowing exactly how your local environment is set up. Have you tried it?
No, I guess that would be. What is it? 127.0.0.1? Does that sound right?
Yeah, let me double check mine. Yeah, that's how mine is set up.
Guess I could just hit admin, right? Just to test it.
Mhm.
That's not what we want.
I think it might be. If you were to type that into your browser, it should take you to the admin sign-in page.
Oh, okay. Man, why does it look so janky?
Good question.
Cool. So, all right. It would be nice to know how to find that, but I guess that works for now.